You ever listen to a piece of music and get the feeling that, well, that it's being kind of rude? But then instead of getting offended, you actually find yourself laughing? It sounds totally backward, right? Well, today we're diving into that exact puzzle. Why music that seems uncooperative or even just plain mean can be so surprisingly funny.
We usually think of music, especially a duet, as the ultimate team effort. It's all about two people working together, creating something beautiful and harmonious. But what happens when that's not the goal? What if one musician is actually, on purpose, trying to mess with the other one? And this brings us to a really cool idea from humor research called disaffiliative humor. Now, this isn't about telling a knock-knock joke. This is the kind of humor that pops up right in the middle of a social interaction. Think sarcasm or mockery, or those playful jabs that create a little bit of distance. The big question for us is, can music do that too? To get to the bottom of this, a group of researchers in France set up a pretty fascinating experiment. They basically wanted to see if they could create this kind of rude humor using just musical instruments, and then, see if anyone actually found it funny. So here's how they did it. They got pairs of musicians to just improvise together. Simple enough. But here's the secret sauce. They secretly told one musician in each pair to play with a specific attitude toward their partner. Some were told to be affiliative, nice and caring. But others were told to be disaffiliative, basically to be rude, insolent, or even disdainful. Then they played these recordings for a totally separate group of people and just asked, how funny is this? So, what did they find out? Well, the first batch of results gave us a huge clue, but honestly, it also created a whole new mystery. And check this out. This is the first big discovery. The music where one player was being rude, the disaffiliative stuff, was rated as way, way more amusing than the nice, collaborative music. So right off the bat, we've got our answer. Mean music can absolutely be funny. But like I said, that is not the whole story. Now, this is where things get really weird. The researchers also had some people listen to only the mean musician's part, all by itself. And strangely enough, the humor ratings were exactly the same. It didn't seem to matter if you heard the social interaction between the two players or not, which makes no sense, right? If the joke is in the interaction, how can it be just as funny when you only hear one side of it? Okay, so that puzzle led to a whole second study. The researchers started to think that maybe the key wasn't just what people were hearing, but what they thought they were hearing. So they decided to add one crucial piece of context. They took the exact same musical clips and played them for new listeners. But this time, they told half the group that the music was a live, spontaneous improvisation. That little hint makes you listen for the real-time back and forth between the players. But the other half? They were told it was a carefully pre-written composition, which makes you focus more on the finished product, assuming every single note was planned out. And believe it or not, that one tiny change in framing cracked the whole case wide open. It turns out they weren't just dealing with one kind of musical humor. No, they had stumbled upon two completely different kinds of musical jokes. And here's the absolute key to the whole thing. Telling people the music was improvised didn't make all the rude music funnier. It only mattered for one specific attitude, the disdainful performances. This was a huge hint that insolent and disdainful weren't just two flavors of mean. They were two totally different kinds of humor. An analysis of the sound itself showed why. The insolent humor is kind of like musical slapstick comedy. The sounds themselves are just funny. They're loud, they're noisy, they're full of surprises. You don't need any context to laugh at a sudden, goofy sound. But the disdainful humor, that's more like clever, witty banter. The joke isn't in the notes themselves, it's in the relationship. The musicians are intentionally playing in a way that's uncoordinated and disconnected. If you think it's a composed piece, it just sounds like a mistake, like bad music. But if you know it's being improvised, you suddenly get the joke. One player is deliberately avoiding the other. The researchers put it perfectly. When we know it's an improvisation, we stop just hearing notes. We start to hear two people playing a social game, right? An I avoid you, you avoid me kind of game. We imagine them having this little bit of fun trying to stay out of each other's musical space, and that's what makes us laugh. Suddenly, we're in on the joke. So, what's the big takeaway here for how we listen to music? Well, it really shows us something pretty profound about the power of context in everything that we hear. I mean, this is really the heart of it all. The very same notes, the exact same uncoordinated performance can sound like a total failure in one context, like a badly written song, but can be a really clever, witty joke in another. It's the context that turns mere sound into actual meaning.
So let's wrap this up. What have we learned? First, that mean music can definitely be funnier than nice music. Second, that musical humor isn't always in the notes themselves, but in the social story we imagine playing out. And maybe most importantly, that knowing the context, especially knowing that music is being made up on the spot, completely changes how we listen, turning what might sound like a mistake into a really clever joke. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. The next time you put on some music, especially something like jazz or any kind of improvisation, try to listen a little differently. Are you just hearing the notes and the chords? Or can you actually hear the conversation, the agreements, the arguments, and maybe, just maybe, the jokes being told between the musicians?